The Florida housing market is on the verge of collapse right now. Prices are dropping, inventory is exploding, and we could be on the precipice of another 2008 style crash where values go down by 30, 40, maybe even 50% in certain cities. In this video, I'm going to give you all the update on the Florida housing market because this data is getting crazy. And the first thing we're going to do is look at the inventory trends in the state on Reventure app. You can see that there's now 169,000 homes for sale across the state of Florida. It's up 33% from last year and the highest level on record going back to the 08-09 crash. At the same time, sellers are now cutting prices in Florida at the highest rate in a decade as well, which is leading to some owners taking massive losses on their homes. But what I think is an interesting question to ask is just how much are home prices going to go down in Florida in this crash, and where are they going to go down by most? And to answer this question, it helps to actually start with a little bit of history of Florida's housing market. Because you can see that home prices actually went down in Florida by 49% in the last housing crash from 07 to 2012. The typical home value went from 252 to 127. It was a big crash where a lot of people got wiped out, and a lot of people have actually forgotten about this crash, even though it didn't happen that long ago. And then you can see since then prices recovered and boomed again and are now starting to trend down because home prices across the state of Florida are approximately 20% overvalued according to data on Reventure app. Prices are about 20% above the long-term norms suggested by the prevailing incomes across the state. And so that's a benchmark for how much prices in Florida could fall over the next couple years if this downturn keeps happening. However, there's big differences across the state in terms of overvaluation. You have some metros which are 23% overvalued, some metros which are 36% overvalued. Down in Broward County, prices are 33% overvalued. These overvaluation rates are going to be instructive in helping you assess as a buyer, investor, or seller how much downside there is. And one thing I think is really interesting is that the mainstream real estate media is now catching on to this Florida downturn. And this is something that you all need to pay close attention to. It's no longer just being reported on by me and some other people on YouTube. It's now being reported on by the big boys. With Redfin just running an article titled "Housing Inventory in Florida Just Hit the Highest Level on Record," they're reporting that the number of homes on the market in the Sunshine State rose 23% year over year, up to 172,000, and this is the highest inventory of any month in records dating back to 2012. Because of this Redfin report, the Tampa Bay Times then ran a similar article talking about how the Florida housing market sees a new high with 172,000 homes listed. And why this is relevant is because now what I'm going to call like the normal people, the normal population in Florida are going to learn that the housing market's in a downturn. This is going to become very mainstream very soon, and that's going to have a big impression on how people in Florida list their homes and how much they cut prices. Because it's getting harder and harder for sellers across the state to justify listing at crazy high asking prices, which is why the values are now dropping. But of course, some people are still being stubborn and listing at excessively high prices. For instance, let's have a little fun, everyone. Let's scroll through some listings here on Zillow in St. Petersburgh and Pinellas County right in my backyard. Let's see what sellers are doing here. All right, we got a 3-bed, 2-bath on the market in St. Pete for $460 grand. Now this was a flip. The owner bought it for $320,000 and is now listing for $460,000. That's $340 a foot. Looks like a decent, okay renovation. I don't know if it's enough to get a $120,000 premium. It's actually wild to me how many home flippers there are here in the Tampa St. Pete area. I feel like 1 out of every 4 people flips homes. All right, let's take a look at another listing. Here's a townhouse for sale, 3-bed, 3-bath, 1,900 square feet for $599. The seller originally had this listed in October at $619, then actually increased the price to $650 and has now cut it to $599,000. So this house has been on the market for like 4 or 5 months, just is not selling. They bought it for $315,000 in August 2015. And so you can see the seller is still trying to make a hefty chunk of change. This is the area that got flooded worse by the hurricane, and you can see we have listings all over the place. People selling houses as is for 200 grand when they purchased them for 325 grand only a year ago. So literally the seller on this is taking a 40% loss. And so there's still a lot of variation in the Florida housing market with what's on the market. And I think for you out there as a buyer or investor, that can be frustrating because you keep hearing from me and others about the Florida housing market being in a downturn. However, there's still a lot of listings on the market that are excessively priced. And I just want to let you know that that's normal. In a housing downturn, things go in a very incremental fashion. First, supply goes up, then prices start to drop slowly but surely. Then some houses start selling below asking price and below what the previous owner bought it for, and slowly but surely those houses enter the comps and then drag down the values across the market. And so it's important to understand that a housing downturn takes time to play out. In that last crash in Florida, it took 5 years for it to play out. We're still in the second or third inning of this downturn. There's a lot to go. And so don't be discouraged if you're a potential buyer and you're not seeing the prices drop as much as you want. Now, let's run through some local market insights across the state of Florida using ReventTrap so you guys can better understand the local dynamics at play, because the state of Florida is a big place. There's over 160,000 listings. There's over 20 million people. So what's going on in your city might be different than what's going on in another city or another neighborhood. So let's drill into this data on inventory, price growth, and price cuts so you can better understand the trends in your market right now. We're going to start by looking at price cuts, everyone. What are the counties in Florida with the highest price cut rates as of February 2025, according to this data from Realtor.com, which is on ReventTrap? So let's isolate Florida here. We can go to the Filters tab, which is something that you guys should do if you want to conduct in-depth analysis. You can isolate specific states. So we're just looking at Florida. And now we're ranking all the counties with the highest price cut rate. And let's actually only look at counties with a population above 200,000 people. You can see Charlotte County and Punta Gorda has the highest price cut rate, 41% of all listings with a reduction, and actually home values here are down 8% over the last year already. Number 2 is Lee County and Cape Coral. 39% of sellers cut the price in February 2025. Values are already down 6% year over year. Duval County and Jacksonville has the third highest price cut rate. Pasco County north of Tampa has the fourth highest price cut rate. Manatee County south of Tampa has the fifth highest price cut rate. We also have high price cuts in Pinellas, Sarasota, Seminole, Collier, and Hernando. With the biggest weakness in Florida definitely coming on the West Coast. So prices are dropping the most here on the West Coast, kind of everywhere down south from Naples all the way up to Pasco and Hernando County. Prices are dropping. But I don't want you guys to sleep on Central Florida. There's some narratives out there that I see people spinning that Central Florida is not going to get hit. Central Florida is like doing better. That's not really true. For instance, if we look at the inventory rate in Polk County in Lakeland, you can see we have over 5,000 homes now for sale in Lakeland, when prior to the pandemic there was only 3,000 homes. So inventory is up 60 to 70% in Lakeland, a clear indication that prices are going to trend down. Additionally, inventory in Osceola County, south of Orlando, has completely gone through the roof. We have over 4,000 homes for sale in Osceola County. Again, that's almost double the pre-pandemic norm in supply and listings. So when you see this much supply on the market, that's a signal to you as a buyer that's becoming more friendly for you and the prices are more likely to drop in the future. Another interesting thing is Southeast Florida, everyone. So we got Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade County. You can see inventory in all these areas is up 31 to 45% year over year. But it's really Broward where inventory is up the most. Broward County now has almost 17,000 homes on the market for sale. That's the highest level since the last crash in 08-09. And I want to put that in context and perspective. Supply is now the highest it's been since 08-09 in Florida. That's huge as far as an indicator of where this market is trending. When the supply is this high and the demand is not recovering, that's telling you there's something structurally wrong in the market. Something is shifted where the buyers, even though there's more and more homes sitting on the market and even though prices are dropping, the buyers aren't coming back. And this is reflected in a statistic called the months of supply on the market in Florida. Months of supply takes the inventory, divides it by the sales pace. And right now in Florida, we have over 7 months of supply. This is according to data from Redfin, almost 7.4 months of supply in February 2025. You could see at the pandemic low, we only had 1.5 months of supply in Florida. So look at that shift in market dynamics. This is the highest months of supply again since 08-09. And what I think is really interesting are the differences in months of supply by state. So just to give you guys some context, Florida has the highest months of inventory of any state in America on the market. Number 2 would be Louisiana. Montana would be number 3. Texas would be number 4. You can see months of supply is also growing in the Southeast, like Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. So it's really this sector of the housing market here in the South and Southeast where the supply is higher. Conversely, if you were to go up to like Massachusetts, there's only 2.1 months of supply on the market. In New Hampshire, there's only 2.7 months of supply. In New Jersey, there's only 2.8. In New York, there's only 3.4 months of supply on the market. So we still have very tight housing market conditions in the Northeast and Midwest. And what's actually really amazing here, if you look at this graph, everyone, we're comparing the months of supply in Florida, the orange line, to New York, the blue line. And what do you see is that currently Florida has over 2 times more months of supply on the market than New York, which is why prices in Florida are dropping but still going up in New York. But what I think is interesting is if you go before the pandemic, it was flipped. Before the pandemic, New York had more months of supply than Florida. So before the pandemic, New York had 7 months of supply. Florida only had 4.6, 4.8. And now this has shifted significantly, indicating again that something structural is going on here in Florida's housing market. Like there's people I talk to who still think that this is somehow just like, not real, or that this is just like a little market blip and that prices are going to recover and demand's going to recover. But like, ask yourself the question, why is New York's housing market doing so much better right now when it wasn't before the pandemic? And I think the answer is people are moving back to New York, right? That's a perfect explanation for why Florida's housing market continues to deteriorate in performance, but while New York continues to get better, is that the people who moved from New York to Florida during the pandemic and stimulated the Florida housing market here are now moving back to New York, so they're selling their houses in Florida, buying in New York. That is the trend that we're seeing that not a lot of people are talking about. A lot of people are still trying to say this is all about, property insurance, which of course the property insurance crisis has a huge impact, forcing people to sell, or the HOA crisis. Yes, that's a big deal. But the biggest deal is a reversion in migration trends. There's simply fewer people moving into Florida than there were, more people leaving. And that's something that's not going to be solved overnight. That's going to take probably a good 3, 4, 5 years to sort itself out. So the good news for you as a buyer is that I think this buyer's market is going to continue in Florida for an extended period of time. I think over the next several years, prices will continue to get cheaper. However, you're going to have to make an assessment of when you want to get into the market and how much prices need to drop before you pull the trigger, because the risk of buying today in Florida or in the next 6 months is that you buy at maybe a reduced price, but then prices drop by more after you buy. And so you're going to have to assess that. And the way to assess that risk is by looking at the data and understanding both the short-term trends in the market and the long-term trends in the market and the fundamentals. And there's really 3 data points that I think you should pay close attention to right now. One is the Reventure app home price forecast score. This is a score from 0 to 100. It's going to let you know how likely it is that prices drop in the near term. But in addition, you're going to compare that price forecast with the overvaluation rate, which shows how historically overvalued prices in Florida are. Both of these data points are available under a premium plan at www.reventure.app, and you can access them down to your zip code so you can get a better sense on the fundamentals in your market. We're looking at the overvaluation rate here for a neighborhood called Hyde Park in Tampa. You can see it's 18% overvalued with a 40 out of 100 price forecast, suggesting that we think prices are going to drop here over the next year. Although the price forecast for some of these surrounding areas are even worse. Some of these areas are like a 27 out of 100 on the score, or a 25 out of 100 if you go across to Pinellas County. So you're going to want to track that forecast score for your area, as well as the overvaluation rate. Head to Reventure app right now to do that. Sign up for a premium plan. The cost is $39 a month, or $33 a month for a 15% discount if you do the annual plan and pay upfront. This is housing market data that you really need in 2025 if you're a buyer, investor, or seller in Florida, so you can better understand how this volatile market is trending.